Hi everyone. Let's talk about chess visualization. So to begin with, you have to know the names of the squares. C3, G4, H7. And you've got to know that really well and easily. And that's just going to give your mind more anchors, more things to label and think about as you visualize your moves. So if you don't already know the coordinates of the squares really well, you don't have them perfectly in mind, then you can practice them on Lichess. So I'm at lichess.org right here. And let me go ahead and sign in. And you can go to the Learn tab and go to Coordinates. And I just tried this a couple times myself. And what you're going to do is quickly click on the square when the coordinates pop up. And you can do this from the point of view of the white player or from the point of view of the black player. I'm a little quicker with white, I believe. So I'm going to try white here. And then we're going to go down and click Start Training. And it says G6 here, really big, and it tells you the next one coming up is H2. So G6, you're supposed to very quickly click on the G6 square, and then it goes to H2, so you click on the H2 square, and you can see your score over here on the left. Then A5, F2, G5, F7, E4, D2, C4, G3, A8, and so on. So you go as quickly as you can, and this is going to ensure you've got the squares completely memorized. Now, you should try it from both sides. Try the black pieces. This is harder for most people. It's a little bit harder for me. You're kind of thinking in reverse here. So D7 is now down here, and G4 is over here, and B5, and D3, and C6, and G4, and I'm a little bit slower at this. Okay, so you can practice this. It'll keep track of your statistics, your average score, your high scores, and so forth. There's a time limit. I haven't shown it, but it's down here, and time is about to expire. So now let's assume you know the coordinates really, really well. What's the next step in chess visualization? Well, I think a good thing to work on next is learning the colors of the squares. And what I mean by that is, without looking at a chessboard, if somebody would call out C7, then you should immediately know or be able to visualize that that is a dark square. So I'm going to go to, let's go to Tools and Board Editor here, and I'm going to clear the board. And I'm going to talk about how to memorize the colors, or how to learn and visualize the colors of the squares. There are good ways of doing this, I believe, and bad ways of doing this. There are all sorts of tricks you could invent. For example, a trick that I invented just for the purposes of this video was, if you want to know the color of a square, let's take C5 for example, then you can look at what rank it's in, which is the 5th rank, and notice and note whether that's even or odd. So 5 is odd, so that's an odd rank, and then it's in the C file. Let's number the files from left to right, 1, 2, 3. So the C file is file number 3. That's odd as well. Well, the rule is, if the file and the rank are both odd or both even, then the square is always dark. So if the file and rank are the same parity, to use a fancy word, both even or both odd, then it's dark. If you have one of each, then it's light. For example, the reason this square is light is because it's in the 6th rank, which is even, but the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th file, which is odd. An odd and an even, one of each, makes it light. I don't believe that's a good idea. Don't learn the colors of the squares by some sort of trick, if you happen to know that. For one thing, it takes too long. And even if you get really, really good at it, the most important reason that's not a good idea is it's not related to chess. Okay, it's a trick. We need to help us visualize the chessboard. The purpose of learning the colors is to help us visualize the chessboard. So how do we do it? Well, I think we should memorize the colors, or learn the colors, I should say, in certain chess-related chunks. Let's start with this main diagonal right here. We all know the rule light on right. When you set up a chessboard, there should be a light square in the right-hand corner of both players. So the white player's at the bottom, and here's the right-hand corner. There's the light square. So that means every square along this diagonal should be light. So let's talk about those squares. Let's think about them in chess terms. Well, you have the corner squares, H1 and A8. We can now remember H1 and A8. When we hear those, we think of those right-hand corner squares, H1 and A8. You can close your eyes right now and think about H1 and A8 being those light corner squares on the right. So anytime you hear those coordinates again, H1 and A8, you'll automatically immediately know that they're the light squares. Well, let's look at the center squares. When I say center of a chessboard, I'm talking about these 4 squares in the geometric center. Well, these 2 are on that main light diagonal. What are they? Well, this one's E4 and this one's D5. So when you hear E4 and D5, you're thinking of those light central squares that are on that main diagonal, connecting the right-hand corner squares. So E4 and D5, when you hear those, think light. You can close your eyes and visualize them. E4 and D5 are on that light diagonal. A couple other squares on the light diagonal are here and here. Think of those as the natural positions to develop your knights. For example, if you're playing a double king's pawn opening, you may play the Ruy Lopez or the Italian game, the Gioco Piano, and you usually develop your knight from G1 to F3. That's on a light square. And your opponent usually responds by developing their knight from B8 to C6. That's on a light square as well. So think of those squares as the natural places to develop those knights. Close your eyes and visualize it. F3 and C6 are the natural places to put those knights, and they're on this light squared diagonal. So anytime you hear F3 or C6 from now on, you know they're automatically light squares. Okay, that leaves a couple more squares on that diagonal. This one and this one. Okay, I like to think of those as places where you could fianchetto a bishop. So on the king side here, on the white side of the board, you might sometimes place your pawns on these 3 dark squares and fianchetto a bishop to G2. So G2 is a natural place to fianchetto a bishop on that light square diagonal, and its counterpart for black is to fianchetto the bishop from F8, or rather C8. You see how it's trickier when you're thinking from black's point of view? From C8 to B7. So B7 and G2 are these natural fianchetto squares, and they're also both light. So you can close your eyes and visualize them. G2, B7, both light squares. Okay, so now try this out. Close your eyes, think about that light square diagonal. What are the 2 corner squares on the right-hand sides of the players called? Yes, those are H1 and A8. What are the squares where you naturally develop your knights on that diagonal? Yeah, white develops his knight to F3 and black develops his knight to C6, both light squares. What are the names of the 2 central light squares on that diagonal? Yes, they're E4 and D5. Okay, so we've got 1/8 of the board kind of working now. We're thinking about these 8 squares. We can practice that further. And we kind of know 1/8 of the board's color now. Well, now go to this kind of other diagonal here, the other long diagonal, and you can run through the same process in your mind. You can talk about the left-hand corner squares being dark, A1 and H8. You can talk about places to develop your knights, or the central squares, or some places where you can fianchetto your bishops. So once you practice both of these diagonals, always thinking in terms of chess, then you've got a quarter of the board done. And now you can work through different areas of the board in different ways. You can make your own personal ways of doing this. For example, maybe you might turn your attention next to what I would call the royal squares, where the king and queen are originally sitting. So from White's point of view, we know the king is on E1 and the queen is on D1. And we know queen goes on its own color, right? So you can think D1 is the queen's square, it's light. E1 is the king's square, it's dark. And then you can think about, similarly, the black queen on the dark D8 square and the black king on the light E8 square. So you can memorize those. You can do other things. Here's a nice idea. Let's go a step beyond and start visualizing some things. Imagine that White has just castled kingside, and his king ends up on G1, and his rook is right next to him on F1. And let's say the pawn cover in front is perfect, undisturbed, like that. Now close your eyes and imagine that. You've got your king on G1, your rook on F1, and you've got your three pawns on H2, G2, F2. I'm closing my eyes myself as I say this. Okay, with your eyes closed, imagine those squares. Well, let's talk about the colors of those squares. What color is the pawn on H2? Okay, so that would be dark because it's right next to that corner H1 light square. So it's a dark square. Now, what about the pawn on F2? Well, likewise, that is a dark square. We skipped from H2 over to F2. We skipped the light square G2 in the middle. Okay, you can open your eyes and notice that in this castled position, we have the king on a dark square, these pawns on dark squares, and let's imagine further we pushed our pawn from G2 to G3. And now we have this nice dark square diamond here. We might fianchetto a bishop. There might be a rook sitting here after castling. But we have this nice dark square diamond, three pawns, and a king in a castled position. They're all dark. You can visualize them with your eyes closed. You can say the names of those squares. You've got G1, H2, F2, and G3. Then you can imagine all the squares around them being light. You can imagine your light squared bishop on F1 going to the light G2 square and commanding that long light diagonal. So this is how you begin thinking about the colors of the squares. Try to chunk things together, group things together into little chess units. And that will help you start learning the colors. And I'll let you continue on with that. Now here's another idea I had to help with visualization. An ultimate goal of mine, I don't know if I can accomplish this, but a goal of mine is to be able to play a full blindfold game of chess. And I reason that if I can play a blindfold game of chess all the way through without looking at the pieces, then shouldn't I be able to visualize anything I'm calculating at any time in any game of chess? It stands to reason, yes. If I can play a 40, 50, 60 move game of chess, then in the middle of an actual game where I'm looking at the pieces, if I want to calculate ahead and be able to visualize the pieces moving around, I should be able to do that as far as I like if I can play a blindfold game. Well, I tried playing blindfold on Lichess, and I'll show you how it goes, how you can try this out yourself. You can go to your username up here and go to Preferences and scroll down all the way to the bottom, Blindfold Chess. You can select Yes. Okay, your preferences have been saved. Now let's go back to Tools and go to an analysis board here, the starting position, or better yet, let's play I think the analysis board is showing the pieces, but once we start a game, I think they'll disappear. Let's go to Tools Board Editor, and let's select Continue from here, the starting position, and play with the computer. Okay, let's put it on level 5, which I believe is a 2000 strength. And let's scroll down and select, let's do the white pieces. Okay, another thing you can do before you get started here playing is go to your name again and go to Sound. And under Sound, at the very bottom, you can select Speech. Okay, so the speech on will tell you the moves that are being made. You'll hear it reinforced verbally like this. I don't know how well you can hear this on the video, but it's my turn and I'm going to move my pawn from E2 to E4. Okay, I heard it say E4 and then I heard the computer respond D5. Now you don't need this speech on necessarily because I can see that the original square and the destination square are highlighted here, so you can see what the last move is. You can also see the move list on the right if you missed anything, or if you actually want to scroll back through the move list to find out something. But I played a blindfold game like this, and I played a pretty good game up till move 10 or 12, I believe, 10, 11, or 12. And then I started to play worse, and it started to become cloudy, and I just quit. But let me play a few more moves here. So this is the Scandinavian. I've got a pawn sitting here on E4. I'm going to use that to capture the D5 pawn. Okay, and we're playing the main line here, queen takes D5. So now there's a queen sitting on D5, and normally what I like to do is gain a tempo on it by moving my knight from B1 to C3 and attack it. Okay, queen has moved back to its original square on D8. Now, when you're playing blindfold, you want to go slowly. And you want to stop and ask yourself questions. And I like to do that maybe every 3 moves. So we've just completed 3 moves, and I'm going to try to visualize the board here. Now you don't have to play a whole blindfold game. You can play just 3, 4, 5 moves if you want to. But now I'm going to ask myself some questions, like what's going on in the position? What pieces does each side have developed? Well, I know I have a knight developed on C3, and I think black has no pieces developed because he moved his queen out, but then moved it right back to D8. There are a couple pawns missing from their original starting squares. There's no pawn here on E2 or there on D7. They're gone. And they've been exchanged, so there are no pawns in the middle of the board either. You can think about other things in the position, like now that the pawn on E2 is missing, this bishop on F1 has a clear open diagonal, and the queen on D1 does as well. So you have to visualize this piece as being free now to move to these squares. This pawn here is missing, so the queen has this file free all the way until it gets up to the D2 pawn here. But also there's a bishop on C8 that has a clear diagonal this way. Let me ask a couple more questions. So it's white's move. Can white hang his knight? If white wants to give away his knight, can he do it? One of his knights. Well, one answer to that question is yes. He can move his knight from C3 to D5 so that the queen could take it. Okay, can white give away a bishop here? Yeah, one way to do it is to move, or the only way to do it is to move the bishop from F1 all the way over to A6 where it can be attacked by that pawn. It can be taken by the pawn. You can move it to D3 where it can be taken by the queen, but if black does that, doesn't he lose his queen? Yeah, he loses his queen from the C pawn. You can ask yourself all sorts of questions as you progress through the game, and then you can make more moves. After you pause, maybe every 2 or 3 moves, pause and think about the position, look at what lines are open, diagonals, what pieces are where, then make some more moves. Like now I'll go ahead and play some more moves here. I'll move my pawn from D2 to D4 in the center of the board. And then my opponent moved to c6, which I notice blocks his knight, but it opens a diagonal for his queen. Also stops my d-pawn from coming forward. He has the d5 square covered, although I do have two pieces on that, the knight and the queen. And he has two defenders, the pawn and the queen. So I could move that pawn forward if I wanted to. I probably would just develop the other knight here. So I'm going to move from here to here. Knight f6. So now we have a pair of knights developed on the king side. I've got both of my knights out actually. I've got this pawn now defended by my knight, and it's attacked by the queen. So I'm going to go ahead and develop my other bishop, or my bishop from f1 to d3 behind the d-pawn. Played g6, maybe intending to fianchetto the bishop. And now I'm at the end of 6 moves, so I can ask myself, what do I know about this position? Where are the pieces? What can go where? What can attack what? Is my king safe? How many checks do I have in the position? That kind of thing. How many things can I attack? And if you ask yourself these questions and pause every 2 or 3 moves, then you can get a good handle on the position and go further. Okay, I won't go any further here. If this is difficult to get this far for you, and it's pretty difficult for me, and you can stop and look at the position at any time. Go back here to Preferences. Let's scroll back down and turn Blindfold to No. Okay, and yeah, it opened another tab when I did Preferences. So I'm going back to this tab. And there's my game, and that's pretty much what I was visualizing. It was pretty solid in my mind, these moves here. And you can play as many moves as you can, and then you can even stop and have the engine analyze your moves for you. For example, let me just hit the flag here and resign, and then I'm going to turn off the sound, and I'm going to go to Analysis Board. And this is what I did last time I played 10 or 12 moves. I went to the analysis board, and then I requested a computer analysis to see how well I played, or how poorly I played, blindfold. So here it says each player had 1 inaccuracy. Let's see what mine was. Okay, the computer's inaccuracy was to play the Scandinavian, and I kind of agree with that. Okay. And now these moves are all fine. And the computer didn't like this move. Yeah, maybe that's a little passive. Does block the queen's defense here. It allows the bishop to come to g4, pinning the knight, removing another defender of that pawn. So maybe we want to keep that queen free, and maybe we want that bishop on a more active square, and the engine suggests bishop c4, which does hit the sensitive f7 square. Okay, so I wasn't, trying to play too seriously, but yeah, I should have played bishop to c4, I believe. All right, anyway, another thing I did when I realized I couldn't play a full blindfold game was I did this. Go to Tools, Board Editor, Clear Board, and I experimented with just setting up positions. And I started really simple. Let's do this position right here. And if it's white's move, white is winning. And I played this blindfold. So I'm going to go back to Preferences and turn blindfold on. Okay, and yeah, I guess I lost my board editor. Okay, clear board. Let's set it up again. Okay, and then you can continue from here, play with the computer. Let's put on the top level since it's winning anyway, and then select the white pieces. Okay, So I have to remember, where did I put the pieces? Okay, the pawn was on f2, king was on f3, and the black king was on f6. All right, so then you play through this all the way till checkmate. And if this is too easy, then make up some other positions with more pieces. I suggest making up winning positions. I tried another one where I had 2 pawns and a queen, and my opponent had 1 pawn and a knight. So obviously winning, but you're just supposed to be practicing keeping track of the moves and the pieces and where they're at. Okay, so I'll play through this. So I have a king here. I'm going to grab the opposition. Maybe you can follow along. Okay, the king moved aside here. I've got the speech turned off. So I'm going to grab some more space with my king, move up to there. Okay, the king dropped back, and I'm going to grab the opposition again. King steps aside to g7. And let's see, can I grab even more space by coming to e6? And the king comes down, I can push my pawn. Yes, that's safe to do. So I'm going to grab even more space with the king. If you don't know this ending, king and pawn versus king, I'll put a link to an earlier video I made that describes the winning or drawing procedure depending on the position. Okay, now the king came up to f6, so it's time to push my pawn. I've gained a lot of space. My king is sitting here in e6. So I'm going to push my pawn to f4. Okay, he dropped his king back. Yeah, I'm going to push my pawn again to f5. He's waiting. Okay, he drops his king back to f8, and this is where I need to grab the opposition here on f6. He's going to step aside one way or the other. He moves to e8, and now I bring my king up to g7, and now my pawn is going to be escorted all the way to queening. But don't stop here. You can keep going all the way until you checkmate. Okay, he moved to e7, so I'm going to call check. He moved to e6, so I'm going to go up. And you have to memorize, where are the pieces? Like my king is still sitting right there. Okay, he moved to d5, so I'm going to queen. Okay, he centralized his king here. I'm going to move my queen over to c5, draw a nice little wall here, keep him on the bottom half of the board. Okay, he moved here to f3, so I'm going to move my queen to d4, cutting off even further, bringing him closer to the bottom of the board. He's voluntarily walking to the bottom. He just walked to d2, so I'm going to bring my queen even further to c3, cutting him off on the third rank. So he moves over here. Now I'm going to bring my king forward. So let's bring it to here. And I have to memorize, my queen is on c3. Let's bring my king down here. Okay, his king just went to f2. I'm going to bring my king here. Okay, now it went to g2, so now I'm going to call check with my queen on g3. Okay, he went to f1. I don't want to stalemate by bringing my king up. I don't know if you know that stalemate. So I'm going to bring my queen to h2. He has to move his king to e1. Bring my king to e3 and checkmate next move. Okay, he went to d1, so I'm going to go over to d2. And it says checkmate. And then if you want to look and see what the game looks like with pieces, let's go back to preferences. I think it opened a new tab this time. Turn blindfold to no. Let's go back. Here's the game. And you can play through it and see how it went. See if it looks just like you remember. And yeah, just like I remembered it. And you can try this with more pieces, bigger positions. And this is like a stepping stone to playing full blindfold chess. Okay, another thing you can do to practice your visualization is puzzles. So you can go to puzzles here, and let's just go to puzzle streak, which starts out with easy puzzles and goes to harder and harder ones. And when you do puzzles, don't do them quickly. If you're practicing your visualization, assuming you're also practicing your tactics and your tactics are sharp, then the idea of solving puzzles is don't move until you see all variations all the way to the end, all possibilities. Okay, then make your first move. So visualize everything. So here I'm noticing there's a back rank issue for black. The black king is on the back rank. It has no escape squares. My queen is covering g7. So I can take my c1 rook, move it to c8 and call check. Is that a checkmate? No, he can block it with his rook on e2. His rook on e2 can go back to e8 and block. Well, then my rook from c8 can take the rook on e8 and call check again. Is that a mate? Yes, this time that's a mate. So this is a mate in two, really simple mate in two tactic based on the back rank. Then the puzzles will get progressively harder. The first 10 or 20 might be pretty easy for you, depending on your skill level. But as they get harder, continue to visualize all possibilities all the way to the end. Even if it takes 5, 10 moves sometimes. Okay? And all the different forks in the road too, all the different ways that it can be played. You've got to see every possibility before you make your move. Most people do not do that when they solve tactical puzzles online. Most people, see a pretty good move and make an assumption that it's going to work out. And usually they're right because they've done so many tactical puzzles that they know how these things work. Okay, so here looks like black is up a pawn. I always like to assess the material. My queen is under attack. His bishop is defended by his queen. So I'm thinking this is a puzzle where I'm going to make a little diversion. I'm going to decoy the black queen by taking the rook on e8. And then when the queen takes back, which it's going to be forced to do, then there will be no defense of the bishop on h4. So I'll take the bishop. But even after that, I don't want to stop. I want to visualize that position in my head. So visualize what happens after we take the rook, queen takes back, and then you take the bishop. So imagine those moves have been played. Now it's black's move. Okay, at the end of a sequence, always, if you've made the last move, always ask yourself, well, what would you move if you were black? What's black's best move in that position? So you're looking for danger. You're looking for anything that black can do to you. And if you don't find anything dangerous black can do, then you've probably solved the puzzle. My back rank is still defended by the other rook. So the queen can't come down and call check. My pieces, my knight is defended. My rook is inaccessible. He can't get to that. My queen will not be attacked. I don't see any double attacks or forks. I'm visualizing where the queen could go. It can come down the file to various places. This square is covered by the knight. This square is covered by the pawn. That square is covered. The queen could centralize itself. Maybe that would be the best move, queen to e5. But it doesn't seem to attack anything from there. I seem to be safe. So I've solved the puzzle. I'm going to take the rook and then take the bishop. So it's a very easy puzzle, but think it through all the way clearly and keep doing this as the puzzles get harder and harder and harder. Okay, one last thing you can do, I'm going to mention in this video to help you with visualization, is play through other games. And I'm going to go to Watch, Lichess TV, and I'm going to go to Previously on Lichess TV. These are completed games, and the highest rated games will be here. I'm going to click on one of them. Here's the move list. I'm in an analysis board right now. And what I'm going to do is read the move list. I like to do 3 full moves at a time, 3 moves each player. Read through the list and visualize them on the board. So I'm looking at d4 and d5, double queen's pawn opening. Bishop f4, the London opening, bishop f4. c6 bolstering the d pawn here, okay, and e3 also bolstering the d pawn. And now that the bishop has been developed to f4, it's outside of this pawn chain. This bishop is free to come out. And then knight to d7. That square is cleared because the pawns are on c6 and d5. So you take your time with those three moves. You visualize that position. You ask yourself questions like, what is attacking what? Where are the pieces? Are there any checks? That kind of thing. And when you're thinking about it and visualizing it for a few minutes, then go forward to that position and see if it looks right to you. See if you missed anything. And then do it again. Go to the next three moves and do it again. So now you're going to be visualizing c4. Okay, and then e6. And then knight c3 developed behind the c4 pawn. And then f5, creating like a stone wall formation here. Knight to f3. And knight g to f6. So visualize that position. Ask yourself what is where. And you only have to be able to think 3 moves ahead, but it's good visualization practice. If it's too easy for you, go 5 moves ahead, or 10 moves, or whatever you can handle. If it's too hard, go 2 moves ahead, or 1 move ahead. Even just 1 move each player is a good start. So it's a good way to get some quick games is to go to Lichess TV and just click on some previous game here, and then you've got a game. It doesn't matter if it's a good game or a bad game, you're just practicing your visualization skills. You can do this with books as well. Another thing I like to do is read chess books, and I like to practice my visualization by looking at the diagrams, and then beneath the diagram you'll see some moves that are to be played that lead you to the next diagram. Well, see how many of those moves you can visualize in your head, and see how much of the book you can read without having to pick up a board. So if you do all of these things, learn the colors of the squares, that's going to help. Practice blindfold, practice playing through other people's games. All these things are going to help you visualize better. Practicing puzzles clearly and thoroughly all the way to the end. All of these things are going to help your visualization. And I'm under the belief now that visualization is the key to chess growth. If you can't visualize moves ahead accurately and clearly, then you can't get too far in chess. Okay, but depending on your skill level, the more you play, the better you'll get at visualization. You don't need to be great at it at the beginning. You need to add to it, month by month, year by year. Okay, hopefully you've got some good ideas from this video. Thanks for watching.